You're watching Quarantine Content, and today I'm going to talk about a film that took everyone by surprise. Not just by being a devilishly well-crafted neo-noir, but by delivering one of the most gobsmackingly honest to God, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled level cliffhanger climaxes in Hindi cinema. I'm talking about Sriram Raghavan's deliciously twisted musical thriller Andhadhun. And ever since it came out in 2018, the film has constantly invited discourse and deeper analyses thanks to its relentlessly cagey plot and deliberately open ending. So, let's take a look at how Raghavan creates an unreliable narrator and how that informs the story that he's telling. Today, we are Sriram Raghavan has a knack for smart thrillers that carry an inherent darkness under a veneer of humour. But unlike his near-perfect neo-noir masterpiece, Johnny Gaddar, which we will talk about in another video, Andhadhun aces the thrills to comedy ratio by sprinkling quirky witticisms throughout its twisty narrative that's laced with self-aware humour. The film begins with a title card that could be read as a smart alecky in-joke, but there's a deeper significance to it. In fact, that oddly placed aphorism possibly holds the key to the entire film. But before I attempt to unravel its specious layers, here's your spoiler alert for Andhadhun. Andhadhun follows Akash, a pianist who pretends to be blind as a means to tap into his inner music and or to observe and low-key exploit the unwitting people around him who sympathize with his plight. This practice lands him a girlfriend, steady paying gigs, and eventually in hot soup as he becomes an unbeknownst witness to a crime. Murphy's Law takes control as Akash gets trapped deeper and deeper in a web of lies, deceit and murder. Until finally, blinded for real and stranded on a road, he somehow manages to come out on top. How? Well, the answer to that murky mystery is the pearl hiding behind the layers of Andhadhun's textured narrative. Andhadhun is a film riddled with duality. The duality of appearances, intentions, instances, and even its resolution. The film's narrative is forked at the climax by a choose-your-own-ending style resolution that depends on how you view the film and its characters. And this dichotomy of truths and lies, good and evil, black and white, is hardwired into the film. Andhadhun constantly juxtaposes its morally grey characters against the polar absolutes of black and white, both thematically and visually. The first time we see Akash is as he runs his fingers deftly across the monochrome keys of his piano, while his black and white cat sniffs around. Even Pramod Sinha is introduced walking over checkered tiles before he goes to meet his wife Simi, dressed in black. And duality continues to reverberate throughout the film in the form of the good and bad decisions made by its characters, but more interestingly, also in how the plot is unraveled versus what is concealed. The two major plot points in the film, Pramod's death and the climax, are consciously kept from the audience in how they truly pan out, and cleverly relegated to narrative ellipses. In the first instance, we do see Pramod reaching home to surprise his wife, only to get surprised himself. But that's when we cut away from the scene. From that point on, all we get is the account of the murderous Simi, who claims it was an accident. Yet it's kind of spurious how Pramod, the one holding the gun, ended up getting shot in his throat. Subsequently, the climax is also narrated to Sophie after the fact, and that too, Akash's version of it, which is of course factitious, and there are enough indications towards that. And that brings us to Raghavan leaves enough breadcrumbs for anyone to decipher the real turn of events in Andhadhun. And while it is bookended by Akash's narration, what we see largely happen within the film is not the story Akash is telling Sophie, but the true series of events as they played out within the story world, including the scenes where Akash isn't present. It's near the end, when the narrative is disrupted and we time jump into Europe, that we enter Akash's altered account. And the reason we know not to trust Akash, someone who habitually lies to and manipulates the people around him, is the liver. The point where the two narratives diverge is a throwaway line of dialogue by Dr. Swami, which is incidentally also the very first statement made by the film. It's as if Raghavan is winking at the audience, nudging them to make the connection. Because that key line, which completely recontextualizes the entire film and is casually dropped in conversation, is said twice, and in both versions it plays differently, indicating that these are indeed two separate instances.
It is a life. It depends on liver. What is life? It all depends on liver.
Now that's a sleight of hand Raghavan pulls straight out of Quentin Tarantino's opus dealing with fractured narratives and subjective storytelling. Here is the first scene from Pulp Fiction.
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
Any of you fucking pricks move! And I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!
And here it is again, near the climax.
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
Any of you fucking pricks move! And I'll execute every one of you motherfuckers!
And of course, there's also a visual confirmation to that in Andhadhun, with the car stopping or driving by in the two alternative versions. Akash is the perfect unreliable narrator. Operating within the darkness of ambiguity, he is exceptionally comfortable at slipping through the cracks of the story and using his blindness to pull the wool over everyone else's eyes. Because deception is easy. It's getting away with it that really matters. Because the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was walking away unscathed at the climax of a movie, riding a killer of a cliffhanger. Guys, if you like this video, share it with your friends and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I know these are really dark times and hope seems lost, but remember, we will endure. And the light at the end of the tunnel will only get brighter. Hang in there. Until next time, ciao.